decision buried for 22 years. A royal mystery nobody could fully explain. And now, just when many believed the truth had been locked away forever, Sophie has allegedly pulled back the curtain on a secret that reaches into the very heart of the monarchy itself. Why did Queen Elizabeth reportedly refuse to allow Camilla's name to be connected with one of the crown's most sensitive symbols of authority? Why did palace insiders become so cautious whenever the subject surfaced? And why does this forgotten controversy suddenly feel more explosive now than it did 2 decades ago? Because according to whispers emerging from royal circles, this was never just about a name, it was about power, legacy, trust, and a queen who may have seen dangers others completely missed. For years, royal watchers searched for answers, but every road seemed to end in silence. Silence from palace officials, silence from senior advisors, silence from those who knew the truth but refused to speak. Yet sometimes silence tells a bigger story than words ever could, because whenever questions emerged about the Privy Seal, the atmosphere reportedly changed. Conversations became careful, statements became vague, and suddenly, everyone seemed determined to move on as quickly as possible. Why? What was hiding beneath the surface? The Privy Seal may sound like an obscure constitutional detail to the public, but inside royal circles it represents something much larger. It represents continuity, authority, stability. It represents the invisible thread connecting one monarch to the next. And according to accounts now being revisited, Queen Elizabeth guarded that thread with extraordinary determination. Some even believe she protected it with greater intensity than almost any other royal symbol during her reign. That is what makes Sophie's alleged revelation so fascinating. Because Sophie was not merely a distant observer, she spent decades beside the late queen. She witnessed moments the public never saw. She observed decisions being made behind closed doors. And if anyone understood how Elizabeth viewed duty, it was Sophie. According to reports, those memories have now taken on entirely new significance. What if the queen's reported resistance was never about personal dislike? What if it was about something much deeper, something institutional, something constitutional? Something she believed future generations might not understand until it was too late. For over 70 years, Queen Elizabeth built her reputation around one principle: duty before everything, duty before comfort, duty before popularity, duty before emotion. Time and again she demonstrated an almost unbelievable ability to separate personal feelings from royal responsibilities. Friends admired it. Critics questioned it. But nobody denied it. And that is where this mystery becomes truly intriguing. Because sources familiar with royal history suggest that private discussions concerning the Privy Seal allegedly triggered concerns among some of the most senior figures within the palace. These were not dramatic confrontations. There were no shouting matches, no public battles, no sensational leaks. Instead, there were careful conversations conducted behind thick palace walls where discretion mattered more than headlines. The public saw glittering ceremonies, state occasions, family photographs, smiling appearances on balconies. But behind those carefully managed images, questions reportedly lingered. Questions about tradition, questions about precedent, questions about where certain lines should be drawn. And according to those who study royal history, Queen Elizabeth took those questions very seriously. What makes this even more dramatic is the position King Charles reportedly found himself in during those years. Long before becoming king, Charles was already walking a tightrope. On one side stood personal loyalty. On the other stood centuries of royal tradition. Imagine the pressure. Imagine trying to balance your personal life against the expectations of an institution that has survived wars, scandals, abdications, and constitutional crises. Every step carried consequences. Every decision carried weight. Every compromise created new complications. Those close to royal affairs often describe Charles as a man forced to navigate impossible situations. And if reports are accurate, this issue may have represented one of the most sensitive challenges of all. Because whenever personal matters intersect with constitutional symbols, emotions collide with tradition, and tradition rarely surrenders quietly. What is remarkable is how the Queen reportedly responded. Rather than issuing dramatic statements, she simply remained firm. No public explanations, no lengthy justifications, no attempts to convince critics. She simply maintained her position. And for those who knew her best, that may have been the strongest signal of all. Because Queen Elizabeth was known for something that made advisors both admire and fear her determination. Once she reached a conclusion regarding the protection of the institution, changing her mind became nearly impossible. Years passed. Governments changed. Public opinion shifted. The royal family experienced triumphs, controversies, and transformations. Yet somehow this mystery refused to disappear. Like a shadow lingering in the background, it continued to spark speculation among historians, commentators, and palace observers. Why had the queen been so cautious? Why had she reportedly remained so firm? What had convinced her that certain boundaries could not be crossed? According to Sophie's reflections, the answer may lie in the Queen's unique understanding of history itself. Elizabeth never saw herself as the owner of the crown. She saw herself as its guardian, a temporary custodian responsible for protecting something that existed long before her and would continue long after her. That mindset shaped everything. It shaped how she approached crises. It shaped how she viewed duty. And it may have shaped how she viewed the controversy surrounding the Privy Seal. To Elizabeth, traditions were not old relics gathering dust. They were safeguards, protective walls built over centuries. Every symbol mattered. Every ceremony carried meaning. Every constitutional principle existed for a reason. Remove one piece carelessly, and the consequences might not appear immediately. But eventually, the entire structure could feel the impact. That belief reportedly became stronger as the years passed. Stronger, more determined, more unshakable. And then, something changed. According to royal observers, there came a point when uncertainty reportedly disappeared altogether. Palace insiders allegedly sensed a shift. Discussions that had once remained open for consideration suddenly seemed settled. The Queen had reached a conclusion, a final conclusion. Before continuing, one thing became impossible to ignore. Sophie's revelation was never truly about Camilla alone. It was never simply about a name appearing beside a royal symbol. The deeper story, the story hiding beneath decades of silence, was about Queen Elizabeth's fear of uncertainty. Not fear for herself, not fear for her reign, fear for what might happen after she was gone. According to accounts now being revisited by royal observers, the late Queen spent much of her reign thinking years ahead, sometimes decades ahead. While others focused on today's headlines, Elizabeth reportedly focused on tomorrow's consequences. That was the difference. It was never about the immediate controversy. It was about protecting an institution she believed would need to survive long after every current royal had become part of history. And that is why Sophie's alleged explanation has sent such shockwaves through royal circles. Because it paints a picture of a queen who saw herself not as the center of the monarchy, but as its temporary guardian. Every decision was measured against one question. Would this strengthen the crown for future generations, or weaken it? Friends and advisors reportedly witnessed this mindset repeatedly throughout her 70-year reign. Personal feelings came second. Public pressure came second. Even family relationships came second. Duty always stood first. That philosophy may sound admirable to some, ruthless to others, but according to those closest to Elizabeth, it was the foundation upon which she built her entire life. As Sophie's comments spread, historians began re-examining moments that once seemed insignificant. Old records, forgotten conversations, long-buried reports. Suddenly, events that appeared unrelated started forming a pattern. A pattern suggesting that Queen Elizabeth approached every major constitutional issue with the same unwavering principle. Stability mattered more than popularity, continuity mattered more than convenience, and preserving public trust mattered more than personal comfort. The more experts looked back, the more one conclusion appeared unavoidable. The Queen's reported position had never been motivated by temporary circumstances. It had been guided by something much larger, a belief that institutions survive only when certain principles remain protected. That realization changed how many observers viewed the entire controversy. What once looked like a disagreement suddenly appeared to be a struggle between two powerful forces: tradition versus change, permanence versus adaptation, history versus modernity. And standing in the middle of that struggle was King Charles. For years, Charles reportedly carried the burden of balancing those competing worlds. He understood the emotional side of the equation better than anyone. Yet he also understood the immense responsibility attached to the crown. Those who followed royal affairs closely often described him as a man navigating impossible expectations. Whatever private challenges existed, they unfolded beneath the enormous shadow cast by his mother's commitment to duty. Meanwhile, Sophie found herself occupying a unique position. She had witnessed Elizabeth's reign from remarkably close range. She understood how the Queen thought, how she weighed decisions, how she separated emotion from responsibility. And perhaps that is why her reflections carry such significance today. They offer something rare, a glimpse into the mindset of a monarch who spent 7 decades protecting an institution she believed was larger than any individual. That message becomes even more important when looking toward the future. Because according to many royal observers, the values Elizabeth defended did not disappear with her passing. They simply moved to a new generation. Prince William increasingly finds himself viewed as the guardian of those same principles. Stability, continuity, service, duty, qualities many believe he inherited directly from his grandmother's example. Alongside him stands Catherine, whose approach to royal life has often drawn comparisons to the late Queen's steady discipline and commitment to service. Together, they represent the future Elizabeth spent decades preparing for, a future where the monarchy must continue adapting while somehow preserving the traditions that define it. And perhaps that is the real reason Sophie's revelation matters so much. Not because it solves a 22-year-old mystery, not because it revives an old controversy, but because it reminds people what Queen Elizabeth believed was worth protecting. She believed duty mattered. She believed service mattered. She believed trust mattered. Most importantly, she believed that the crown could survive personalities, scandals, disagreements, and changing times, but only if its foundations remained strong. That belief shaped every major chapter of her reign. It shaped difficult decisions. It shaped private sacrifices. It shaped choices that many outsiders never fully understood. And now, years after her passing, those choices continue to spark fascination because they reveal something extraordinary about the woman behind the crown. Not a queen driven by conflict, not a monarch obsessed with control, but a guardian determined to preserve an institution she considered a sacred responsibility. And that is where this story leaves us today. Because, even after Sophie's alleged revelation, one question still lingers in the shadows. If Queen Elizabeth was willing to defend these principles so fiercely, what other concerns did she quietly carry about the monarchy's future? What warnings never became public? What lessons remain hidden within decisions that historians are only now beginning to understand? The answers may still be buried behind palace walls, but one thing is certain. 22 years later, the mystery is no longer just about a name, a seal, or a forgotten controversy. It is about the extraordinary determination of a queen who spent her entire life protecting what she believed would outlast them all. And as new generations step forward to carry that burden, the debate she left behind may be far from over. The story, it seems, is still unfolding.